Week number 8 of the 2025 college football season is now in the books. It was an exciting weekend all around the Big Ten, and you are in the right place for everything. It's the Week 8 postgame show right here on Big Ten Breakdown. I am Ben Stevens. All of this in partnership, as always, with the I-80 Club. Make sure you are watching, you are liking, you are following, you are subscribing, wherever you get your favorite shows. Apple, Spotify, if you are viewing this on YouTube, if you want all of the great content in coverage, the I-80 Club is putting out advertisement free. It's patreon.com/I-80 Club. That's I-80 Club, socials, all of those places as well. We appreciate you tuning in for each and every step of this college football season. Week number 8, our 8th full Saturday and weekend of the 2025 college football season is now through. We had 17 Big Ten teams in action. 9 Big Ten games featuring at least one school from this league. The only team on a bye, the Illinois Fighting Illini. We had non-conference games, rivalry games, and so much to break down in what was a chaotic weekend all around the country in college football. We had 11 teams enter week number 8 undefeated. 5 of those 11 go down over the weekend, including the number 2 team in the country, but not for any longer in Miami. There is so much to get to here on the Big Ten Breakdown Week 8 postgame show, but I do want to start with this. A little bit of transparency, a peek behind the curtain. Because of prior obligations, I am recording this episode a little bit earlier than I normally do on a Sunday afternoon. So, hand up. This would be the point of the show that before we get into our 4 down honors for the 4 best things that we saw from the weekend that was in the Big Ten Conference, if there is any breaking news, this is where we start. Will there be breaking news? We expect there to be a ton of head coaching firings on this perhaps bloody Sunday. But as of the time of this recording, around 2 p.m. Eastern, there hasn't been a dismissal of a head coach. That's all around the country. That's in the Big Ten. I'm not so sure that Wisconsin's Luke Fickell or Michigan State's Jonathan Smith gets let go this weekend, but that includes Florida's Billy Napier, Florida State's Mike Norvell, Auburn's Hugh Freeze, so on and so forth. There has not been a firing at any point. You can see right here, I've got the On3 account updating at each and every moment. I will continue to do so periodically throughout this recording. So if there is breaking news while I am speaking to all of you, we will react to it on the fly. If for some reason later in the day, Wisconsin makes a change at the head coaching spot and fires Luke Fickell, here are my thoughts, posthumously, if you will. Luke Fickell, during his time at Wisconsin, 15-18. It has gotten so drastically bad for a proud football program in Madison. A change will be made. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. Wisconsin blanked in back-to-back home games for the first time since 1980. Shut out by Ohio State on Saturday, 34-0. That was not surprising by any means. The Badgers team total 7.5 for all of the woes offensively for Wisconsin this year against the best defense we have seen in college football in more than 3 decades. It was no surprise that Ohio State made Wisconsin post a goose egg even at home. But it does speak to how dismal things are right now in Madison, Wisconsin. Shut out in back-to-back home games, 2 consecutive home games at Camp Randall for the first time since 1980, for just the 3rd time since World War II came to a close, 1968, 1980, and now year number 3 under Fickell in 2025. It has to get better. It needs to get better. And whether it's Luke Fickell, who ends up being fired from Wisconsin, or Jonathan Smith. Again, do not think that is going to happen this week in East Lansing, as in Spartan Stadium. Next Saturday night, they will host Michigan in that bitter rivalry. I thought both of these hires would be home runs. I thought they would lead to tremendous success for these proud football programs. It has been anything but. And when you look at the credentials for both of these guys, this is why. Luke Fickell had such success at Cincinnati, of course, leading the Bearcats in the 2021 season to be the first Group of 5 team ever to reach the 4-team college football playoff. He was 57-18 at Cincy. That's a .760 win percentage. He was the National Coach of the Year in 2021. He was the right hire, even if the process resulting in his hire back before the 2023 season was a little bit murky for then interim head coach in Jim Leonhard. He should have had things work in Madison They did not. And again, you can just clip this off and we can play this whenever the firing of Luke Fickell happens. Same story for Jonathan Smith. Now 8-11 through his 19 games as the Spartans head coach. They got beat by Indiana pretty big in Bloomington on Saturday afternoon, 38-13. Did end up covering because of a late field goal with just over 30 seconds remaining. But Jonathan Smith at his alma mater in Corvallis for Oregon State led a proud Beavers program that had seen such success under Mike Riley back to that level in the Pac-12. In 2021, Jonathan Smith delivered the Beavs their first winning record in a while. In 2022, led Oregon State to a 10-win season for the first time since 2006. In his final 3 years in Corvallis before becoming Michigan State's head coach, he led Oregon State to 25 wins over a 3-year span, their best since 06 through 08. Again, the track record, the pedigree, the experience of both Luke Fickell and Jonathan Smith, although at a smaller level, were both there for them to go to a place with bigger resources and bigger pride and bigger expectation and have success. It did not happen. And it's probably not going to happen for either of those two guys, even if during this Sunday that I'm recording slightly early, no changes happen. And to be honest with you, I think there's probably a 10% chance that either of those two guys get fired on this Sunday, entering your week when you are watching here on a Monday for the Week 8 post-game show. At the end of the year, later in the season, very different tune. Right here, right now, I'm not so sure it happens. Again, Michigan State rivalry game at home against Michigan. If they look dreadful against the Maize and Blue, I think that might be the final nail in the coffin for Jonathan Smith. Wisconsin, in one of the most difficult months of October you could ever hope for. They just hosted the number 1 team in the country. They will probably fly to a top 5, top 10 team in the country in Oregon in Autzen Stadium next week to end out this brutal month. I'm not so sure there is an impetus for either of these two programs to make the change right here, right now. But at a certain point, you have to stop the bleeding, because what we are seeing right now is rock bottom or very near that bottom for both of these programs. As we're talking about any head coaching changes that we could see, the update still nothing new, according to those college football insiders at On3. So again, if there is nothing that has happened in the Big Ten this weekend in terms of coaching changes on a Sunday afternoon, I apologize. Skip forward. You got my thoughts either way, and we did talk about some games, but let's get right to our distinct honors, our 4-down honors, the 4 best things we saw from the Big Ten weekend that was. And for a second time in a 3-week span here on a post-game show on Big Ten Breakdown, first down honors go to the UCLA freaking Bruins, man. They have won 3 consecutive games, doing so in tremendous fashion with a late rally in the fourth quarter inside the Rose Bowl against Maryland. UCLA beats the Terps 20-17 to win a 3rd consecutive game. Give Tim Skipper all of the flowers. Give Jerry Neuheisel all of the flowers. It does not need to be a competition for who deserves more praise. Both of these guys should be heaped with praise, as well as the rest of the coaching staff, for absolutely and immediately changing the mentality in this interim staff for the rest of 2025 for UCLA. They have instilled a confidence within this team, within this roster, within the entirety of the program that is really hard to replicate at any time, certainly during the middle of a season after your head coach had been fired after 3 games. And what we are seeing right now for UCLA, in the way that they got things done on Saturday, Nico Yamaleava with that 14-yard touchdown pass to Mikey Matthews with 3.5 minutes left. Then Malik Washington threw an interception. UCLA converts with a field goal. They're up 7. Maryland scores on a very quick drive, 75 yards, 1 minute and 24 seconds. Malik Washington to Jaleel Farouk to tie the game at 17 all. UCLA had just about 35 seconds left. They marched down the field rather quickly, and they score a field goal for the game winner. Mateen Bugani, excuse me. That was bad. Mateen Bugani hits the game-winning field goal for UCLA, a 23-yarder to deliver the Bruins their 3rd consecutive win. Let's make sure we don't mess that up again. Mateen Bugani hits the game-winning field goal from 23 yards out for UCLA to deliver that 3rd consecutive victory. This is a UCLA team that did not lead for a single second in their first 4 games of the year. Of course, then 4 losses. For how they have responded in 3 straight, they held Northwestern scoreless in the second half of that 4th loss to start this year following the bye. And since then, what they have done, especially offensively under Jerry Neuheisel. 193 rushing yards against Maryland. The week prior against Michigan State, 238 on the ground, 269 against a Penn State defense that was supposed to be good, but it has been anything but, averaging 5.3 yards per carry in this 3-game win streak. It's been sensational. And now UCLA, next weekend for week number 9, plays in maybe the most consequential Big Ten game of the weekend, as they will take on Indiana. It's the only conference game between two teams that have combined for 7 conference wins so far this year. Again, what they are doing right now, the confidence and the poise of Nico Iamaleava and how he has played the quarterback spot to deliver that confidence for the entirety of this roster and this program. All the credit in the world to Tim Skipper. And we mentioned this in the pregame show in week 8. Tim Skipper's message during UCLA's bye week, after the dismissal of Deshaun Foster, that first open week before they had to get into game preparation for Northwestern, was simply, it's fall camp once again. We are taking this down to the studs. We are going to start fresh. We are going to build this program back up. And they have done absolutely that. UCLA, the freaking Bruins, man, they earned first down honors because they have won 3 consecutive games. And Mateen Bagani, I cannot say that. Mateen Bagani, my apologies for screwing up your last name a few times, but kudos to you for delivering the game-winning field goal to have that 3rd consecutive victory for the Bruins, 20-17. Second down honors goes to blanking the competition. 2 teams did that on this weekend of week 8 in Big Ten football. We start with Northwestern. Northwestern beats Purdue 19-zip at home. It's the first 5-2 start in a full season, so excluding 2020. It's the first 5-2 start for the Cats in a full season since 2015. It is the first time they have held an FBS foe scoreless in a full game since 2017. And what Northwestern has unpacked on the offensive side, really establishing the run, has worked so well for Northwestern. 232 yards on the ground against this Purdue team on Saturday. Joseph Hyman, 87 yards. Caleb Komolafe, 67 yards. Griffin Wilde, who was a touchdown machine, a 4th consecutive game for Northwestern with a receiving score. By the way, Northwestern has won all 4 of those games for 4 straight. And we talked about the key matchup for this one, that if the Boilermakers were going to win that first Big Ten game under Barry Odom, they would have to possess the football and take care of it. One of the worst turnover margins in the country. Purdue lost the turnover battle once again, 3 turnovers to 2 for Northwestern, a -11 turnover margin for the Boilermakers. This result is disappointing, right? For all the creative offensive schemes we had seen under Josh Henson, the first-year OC in West Lafayette, under Barry Odom, to get blanked by Northwestern. You lost Ryan Brown on the opening play of the second half, a left shoulder injury. You had Malachi Singleton come in, but he's more of a bruising type of change of flow, utilize his athleticism, physicality, and legs, quarterback than that of Ryan Brown. Again, disappointing. But Northwestern is 1 win away from bowl eligibility. 5-2 to start a full season for the first time since 2015. And of course, who was the coach then? That would be Pat Fitzgerald. I thought it was a really nice moment on Saturday afternoon at the lake to see Fitz back, not just the place that he coached for such a long time, but the place that he had some of the best success you ever could as a college football player, as a player. Back with the 1995 Rose Bowl team, who was honored on Saturday afternoon in Evanston. It felt like a moment perhaps of moving forward for this program, right? Fitzgerald and his civil suit against Northwestern has been settled. Fitzgerald was found that he was in no wrongdoing or had no prior knowledge of any of the hazing scandal that led to his dismissal now over 3 years ago. He is making a lot of money from the Northwestern Athletic Department and administration because of his dismissal and his termination and how that was handled. I hope that both parties, Pat Fitzgerald and Northwestern, took that moment of progress and positivity on Saturday to move forward. Healing, perhaps, positive improvement, I think we can all understand. And I would bet that Fitz is rooting for David Braun, the guy that he hired as his defensive coordinator before he ended up being dismissed. And David Braun has done such incredible work in a really murky circumstance with Northwestern. 8 wins in 2023, a step back in 2024, but now 1 single win away from bowl eligibility here in 2025, and a blanking of Purdue. Really positive stuff. That was also more than likely The final game at the lakefront at Martin Stadium on the shores of Lake Michigan, because Northwestern has 2 final home games in November against Michigan and Minnesota. Those games, of course, will be played at Wrigley Field. The new Ryan Field is supposed to open in the fall of 2026, ready for next college football season. So that was probably the final game of the 2-year run at the lake, and what a high note to exit on for what turned out to be one of the great college football venues in this sport. We will romanticize the lakefront in Martin Stadium for a long time to come. The other shutout in Big Ten play this weekend, as we shared earlier in discussing the struggles and potential moves for Luke Fickell in Madison, is Ohio State blanking the Badgers 34-zip. In the honors category, this is the second down honor. For blanking the competition, we highlight the positive. We already talked about the negative for this Badgers side. 27 consecutive drives without registering a single point. But this also is the strength of Ohio State. Their second shutout of the year, one of 2 FBS teams. There's 136 around the country that has multiple shutouts this year alongside San Diego State. And what Ohio State is doing this year is not just tremendous. It is historic. Ohio State is becoming, before our very eyes, one of the best college football defenses we have seen in the history of this sport in the last half century. The Buckeyes now, after blanking the Badgers, have only allowed a total of 41 points through 7 games. 41 points given up through 7 games. They have not allowed a first half touchdown. They have only allowed 12 total points in the opening 2 quarters of all 7 of their contests so far this year. The Buckeyes are the only FBS team to allow fewer than 66 points. And again, they have allowed just 41. It is the fewest by an FBS team since 2000. Including the 2025 version of Ohio State. Now, 5 FBS programs have allowed fewer than 50 points in their opening 7 games of the year since 2000. All 4 of the previous ones have played for a national championship. 3 of the 4 have won a national championship. Ohio State has allowed the fewest points, just 41 in total, through 7 games by an FBS program since Florida State did so back in 1993 when FSU only allowed 38 points through those first 7 games. And what did the Noles do in 1993? They won a national championship as well. I would not be surprised to see the defending and reigning national champs in that very same spot come January. And we have highlighted the Buckeyes defensively, but I do want to take a moment to also highlight the quarterback in Julian Sayin. There was some conversations about the training wheels and could this Ohio State offense fully open up and be explosive? Julian Sayin is playing like one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the country. I understand that you are going to say it is Wisconsin. I do not care. When you put up a game with this kind of stat line, even against video game competition, it is worthy of praise. Julian Sayin in Madison on Saturday afternoon, 36 of 42 for 393 yards in 4 touchdowns. He becomes the first FBS quarterback since Geno Smith in 2012 and the 3rd ever FBS quarterback in recorded history dating back to 1995 to have a game with at least 375 passing yards. He had 393. With at least 35 completions, he had 36. 4 passing touchdowns with 6 incompletions or fewer to add on the efficiency. Julian Sayin, the 3rd ever quarterback in recorded FBS history dating back to at least 1995 to put up a game with that stat line. That's tremendous stuff. And he has the pieces at his disposal. We know Jeremiah Smith, but Carnell Tate is playing as good as any receiver right now in the Big Ten Conference. Ohio State is an absolute wagon, and I mean an absolute wagon. Quick check just to see if anything has happened here in live breaking news. It has happened indeed, not in the Big Ten, but Florida has fired Billy Napier, as we just learned. All right, that's where we go right now. Nothing that would affect the Week 8 postgame show here on Big Ten Breakdown. 3rd down honors, speaking of wagons, go to taking out some anger, which is what Oregon did to Rutgers and Piscataway on Saturday. The Ducks, of course, following the tough loss to Indiana at home in Autzen, go cross country and leave no doubt. Hammering Rutgers 56-10. Not just beating Rutgers, hammering Rutgers 56-10 and taking out that frustration against a bad Rutgers defense. Oregon racks up a total of 750 yards, the second most in program history, only trailing the 777 the Ducks accumulated in a Pac-12 game against Cal way back in 2015. Oregon, 750 total yards against the Scarlet Knights, 415 of those on the ground. Again, the second most in program history for the Ducks, only behind that 2015 game against Cal. I mean, goodness, right? We talked about it here. I thought Oregon, despite the cross-country travel, would take out some of that anger after the difficult loss at home to IU. I was not sure it would look like a 46-point lopsided affair where Oregon posted 750 total yards. But let's not overreact to the Ducks losing to who the number 2 team in the country is going to be in Indiana after the Week 8 slate of college football. Oregon is one of the 5 best teams in college football. Might not be 5, might not be 4. Heck, it might not even be 3. The Ducks are going to be just fine. Oregon is a great team, and they have that mentality that Dan Lanning instills. We are not going to rest on our laurels. We are going to go do something about it if we have taken a defeat. I believe Oregon now a perfect 6-0 following a loss in the same season, including bowl season, for the Ducks under Dan Lanning, now in year number 4. Fourth down honors go to Minnesota. Row the boat, baby. Minnesota in a huge game on Friday in the battle of the $5 bits of broken chair trophy in the Twin Cities against a ranked Nebraska team who will no longer be ranked. Minnesota beats the Huskers 24-6. Minnesota clearly takes this rivalry against the Huskers with an unofficial rivalry trophy, but a ton of familiarity between these two teams, not only as conference foes, but even before Nebraska joined the Big Ten, 51 meetings dating back to 1900 as non-conference foes. Minnesota clearly takes that familiarity very personally. And PJ Fleck coaches for the Gophers to go out there and make statement after statement after statement after statement after statement after statement against the Cornhuskers. Why did I say statement 6 times? Because the Gophers have now beaten the Huskers 6 consecutive seasons. And that victory over number 25, Nebraska, will be the 7th win, is the 7th win for PJ Fleck against a ranked team during his tenure with the Gophers since 2017. The 7 wins against an AP top 25 foe for Fleck, the most by a Minnesota head coach in program history. And that's a rich history in the Twin Cities. We thought one of the advantages Minnesota might have against a porous Nebraska rush defense would be Darius Taylor, who was just 10 yards away entering Friday from reaching 2,000 in his Minnesota career, matching Ibrahim, to be the 3rd fastest to ever do it. Well, Darius Taylor got 10, and then a lot more than that, 138 more on top of 10, by the way, 24 carries, 4 DT, 148 yards, and a touchdown. Now, 2,138 rushing yards in his career did match Mo Ibrahim for the 3rd fastest to ever do it in only 23 games. Minnesota, by the way, not just physicality up front to dominate Nebraska, which has been a weakness for the Huskers all year long, but also for what they did defensively. This was a Minnesota defense that entered the matchup against Nebraska struggling. They had allowed at least 450 yards to both Purdue and Ohio State in back-to-back games. Not the case against what had been an explosive Huskers offense through the first 6 games of the year for Nebraska. Minnesota registered 9 sacks, both a program record for the Gophers and the Huskers, but in a bad way for Nebraska, and 10 TFLs for that Minnesota defense. They held the Huskers to just 213 total yards. Again, Minnesota had allowed at least 450 of total yardage in their previous 2 games. All the credit in the world to what Minnesota unlocked. Now we go to the negative side of that after giving out our 4 down honors in a huge victory for a Minnesota team that is now 5-2 once again. They have won all 5 games at home this year to start things off at the bank. And as we said in our preseason prospectus, PJ Fleck is a winner. Do not be surprised if Minnesota ends up with 8 or 9 wins once again, because they have won at least 8 games in 3 of the previous 4 seasons in Minneapolis. After our 4 down honors to highlight the best of the best from the weekend that was in the Big Ten, of course, we react to the negative side of that as well. That was as bad of a loss for Nebraska, maybe in all 3 years now under Matt Rule. If it was not number 1, it was one of the 3 worst, right? And there was so much conversation this past week about Matt Rule and his alma mater, the team that he grew up rooting for in State College, and being the front runner to be that next Penn State head coach. Matt Rule made plenty of statements, but especially on Friday or Thursday on the Pat McAfee show, basically saying Nebraska is a destination job. I love Penn State. I will always love Penn State. I hope whoever they hire is great for them. But basically, in so many words, doing the thing that only Curt Cignetti could do better, which was sign a contract extension, saying he is here to stay in Lincoln. This not only will lead to conversation about Matt Rhule not being worthy or deserving or a top candidate for that Penn State job, but I do not think it will calm any of the clamor that maybe Matt Rhule has his mind elsewhere. Whether fair or not for this game, the result of what you put out to get humiliated, to give up 9 sacks. I know the offensive line had some issues. Elijah Pritchett was ejected for targeting in the first half. Rocco Spindler broke bones in his hand and had to be taken to the hospital because of it. The offensive line that had been worrisome this year, they gave up 7 sacks in the loss to Michigan, was worrisome against the Minnesota front that had not really shown that level of production until Friday night. It's as bad of a loss as you can conceptualize because Nebraska got to a high once again, 5-1 for a second consecutive season for the first time since 2013-14. But when they have reached 5 wins under Matt Rhule, when they get to that 5-win threshold, they make bowl eligibility seem like it is the most difficult thing to ever reach because they are now 1-10 under Matt Rhule after winning game number 5 of their season, or winning that 5th game of their season. Nebraska is back at home this week in Lincoln, taking on Northwestern. The Huskers are an 8.5-point early favorite, but this is a Wildcats team that cannot just be overlooked, right? As it kind of feels like Minnesota was just slightly overlooked. Like, hey, we've got so much circulating around our program, feeling good, ranked once again in the top 25 for the first time in October in quite some time. It felt like that for Nebraska. You can't overlook Northwestern here, who has played really good football, been really good on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and a Northwestern team that has won 4 straight. That will be the Week 9 pregame show. I'm just saying that loss for Matt Rhule and company in Lincoln, a damning and frustrating result after having so much goodwill built up entering week number 8. Of course, the $5 bits of Broken Chair Trophy stays in the Twin Cities. It was one of our 3 rivalry matchups of week 8 in the Big Ten as we roll on here in the postgame show. Billy Napier has been fired. We talked about that breaking news, just making sure that no other head coach from the Big Ten Conference has been dismissed at this moment. It does not look like that is the case. Just doing some double checking here. This is live on the fly. I'm still talking to all of you. Is anything else going on? No, it is not. All right. So as we keep it rolling here on the Big Ten Breakdown post-game show in week number 8. Wow. Okay. Just reading some live updates as we speak. Speaking of rivalries, the battle for the jeweled shillelagh in South Bend on Saturday night. Notre Dame, USC, top 20 tilt. Notre Dame beats USC 34-24 in the 96th, and we hope not final, but as of this moment, final meeting in this long and storied rivalry that has meant so much to college football. And for all the reasons, as we got ready for our Big Ten breakdown game of the week, in this rivalry game between the Irish and the Trojans, that we said USC had to carry over the momentum from a huge home victory against a ranked foe at the time in Michigan inside the Coliseum, USC did the exact opposite. Notre Dame ran all over Southern Cal to the tune of 306 yards. Jeremiah Love, one of the best running backs in the country. Apparently the scout wasn't there for USC. He had 228 rushing yards and a touchdown. The 228 rushing yards for Jeremiah Love, the most by a running back in the USC-Notre Dame rivalry ever. The most for a Notre Dame running back inside Notre Dame Stadium in South Bend ever. Not only a historic win, perhaps, for Notre Dame as a football program, but a historic night for Jeremiah Love. Oh, by the way, his number 2 or 1A perhaps, Jadarian Price, 87 rushing yards and a touchdown. Also in a critical moment late in the third quarter after Jaden Mayava does what he does best, connecting with Jacoby Lane on a long touchdown toss. SC in front of Notre Dame, 24-21. On the very ensuing kickoff, Jadarian Price, 100-yard house call. Notre Dame led. Notre Dame never trailed again. They took the lead for good with just about 4.5 minutes remaining in that third quarter. It was a death blow after USC had built some momentum. And again, USC last week against Michigan won a big boy Big Ten football game with physicality up front on both sides. Was not the case against Notre Dame for Danton Lynn's defense. 306 rushing yards, USC as a team, now without Wayman Jordan and King Miller being that guy, only 68 rushing yards. USC on a sloppy, wet night in South Bend, 3 turnovers. Notre Dame only had one of the worst interceptions you will ever see out of a quarterback is what CJ Carr threw, but USC lost the turnover margin. They lost the battle of physicality. They lost the ground game margin. All of that goodwill that USC had built up last week against Michigan, thinking maybe this was a turning point. Big boy football, when needed, against Big Ten level competition or Notre Dame, evaporates right out the window. USC now has lost 11 consecutive games on the road, ranked opponents after winning their first ranked game at home in the Coliseum under Lincoln Riley since November of 2022. 11 straight road losses to ranked foes, the last 6 under Lincoln Riley, who is 0-6 against ranked opponents. And Lincoln Riley, when he has taken USC 2+ time zones away to the Central or Eastern time zone, USC now 0-7. That's damning stuff, man. And it did not feel like what USC was going to bring into that game based on what we had seen with our very 2 eyes in a matchup against Michigan at home. 1 step forward, 2, 3, 4 maybe steps back for Southern Cal. The other rivalry game of this weekend, the old brass spittoon is staying in Bloomington for back-to-back seasons for the first time since the late 60s. As expected, Indiana beats Michigan State 38-13. We had a battle of the field goals in the final 2 minutes for who would cover a 27.5-point spread. Indiana hits one with Nico Radicic. I'm just messing up every pronunciation today. Indiana hits one with fewer than 2 minutes remaining in regulation, takes a 38-10 lead on 4th and 12 from IU's 16-yard line with just over a half minute remaining. Jonathan Smith calls for a field goal, 38-13 the final ledger. If you had MSU plus 27.5, you're feeling pretty good. If you had Indiana minus 27.5, maybe not so much. For the actual result of the game and the significance of winning the spittoon for a second consecutive year, Indiana is 7-0 in a second consecutive season for the first time ever in program history. It is the first time the old brass spittoon is staying in Bloomington for a second straight season since Indiana won 3 straight in 1967 through 1969. Defense was a little bit soft, I thought, for IU early, but the offense continues to hum with a wonderful offensive rhythm under Mike Shanahan and, of course, with Fernando Mendoza under center. 24 of 28, just such an efficient stat line once again. 332 yards, 4 touchdown tosses. 3 of those touchdown tosses to Elijah Surratt, who had 2, and Omar Cooper Jr., who had 1 in more than 100 yards. They continue to be one of the best wide receiver duos, not just in the Big Ten. And there's a couple of really good ones. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate at Ohio State, Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon at USC, but in all of the country with how prolific and productive Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Surratt have been for Indiana this season. One thing that is coming out as we speak here on this Week 8 postgame show is the renewed AP poll, where Indiana is going to be the number 2 team in the country following the Miami loss to Louisville on Friday night. Indiana, this last week, was ranked number 3 in the AP Top 25 for the first time ever. Highest ever ranking. Indiana is about to do one better, getting to number 2 in the country for the first time ever. That means, once again, the top 2 teams in all the nation hail from the Big Ten. Ohio State 1, Indiana number 2. Added to the list of firsts and program records that Kurt Cignetti has brought to Bloomington in a very short time. Taking care of business is our final category here on the Week 8 postgame show. Let's just make sure before we get to our final category, we have not seen any further breaking news around the country in terms of head coaching dismissals and whatever that looks like. Does not look like that is the case here at this moment. Just Billy Napier. Yes. And by the way, just confirming, as you can see here, the new AP poll is up, and Indiana, the number 2 team in the country. Oregon up to number 6. Illinois back in despite being on a bye to number 23, and Michigan at number 25. That looks like the Big Ten teams that have gotten there. All right, good stuff. Okay, so as we keep it rolling here on this Week 8 post-game show, I do not think by the time this recording is done in about 3 minutes that Luke Fickell or Jonathan Smith will be fired. But if so, make sure you are going back to the first 4 minutes of this post-game show. Taking care of business, our final category. Iowa beats Terry Smith, the interim head coach for Penn State, in his Nittany Lions debut, 25-21. 24. Yet another game in this series between these Big Ten foes of Iowa and Penn State. 5 of the last 7 decided by 6 points or fewer. The last 4 in Kinnick Stadium, all by 6 points or fewer. And it was a great game on Saturday night at Kinnick, showing why Kinnick at night, one of the greatest atmospheres in college football. Iowa trailed early in the second half, 21-10, to overcome a double-digit deficit for the Hawkeyes. Has not been the easiest thing in years past, and yet they rallied because of the ground game. Both Mark Gronowski, Kamari Moulton, Caden Weegan, everybody. 245 yards for Iowa on the ground as a team, 7.4 yards per carry. An end around to Weegan from 8 yards out was the game-winning touchdown with just over 4 minutes, or just about 4 minutes left. Mark Gronowski in the game, an Iowa single game record for a quarterback, 130 rushing yards on the ground, 2 rushing scores. Gronowski in 7 games for Iowa so far has 10 rushing touchdowns. He is one shy of Wilburn Hollis, who has the Iowa single season record with 11 rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in a single season. Mark Gronowski and his legs absolutely tore up this Penn State defense on a Saturday night. And let me go there for just a second before we talk about Iowa's success establishing the run. One thing that has not changed for Penn State is the defensive talent on that side of the ball, and Jim Knowles being the highly priced defensive coordinator that had done so many great things for Ohio State in Columbus the past few years. There is too much talent on that defense to get gouged continuously on the ground. UCLA did it. Northwestern did it. Iowa just put up 245 yards. 20 games now for Tim Lester, the offensive coordinator for the Hawks. This was the 11th time Iowa registered at least 200 rushing yards. That's incredible. They were the Big Ten's leading rushing team last season for the first time since 1960, nearly averaging 200 yards per game. And neither quarterback in this Big Ten affair in Iowa City even got to the century mark of 100 yards. Mark Gronowski's so great on the ground, only 68 yards through the air. Ethan Grunkemeyer making his first career start for Penn State, 15 of 28, 93 yards, and 2 interceptions. And Iowa's defense stepped up when it needed to most. They only allowed 14 points, a 66-yard field goal try as time expired to end out the first half. A very interesting and questionable decision by Kirk Ferentz, who, credit to KF, 27 years, he understands responsibility and accountability. Even got emotional discussing it in the press conference because of how bad he felt for his team, putting his team in that unfortunate circumstance and situation. It almost cost Iowa the football game. The 66-yard try by Drew Stevens was blocked and taken back the other way for a touchdown by Penn State. But I thought Iowa to show that resolve, down by 11 in the third quarter, and then to make the plays when needed. Iowa, a huge fourth down defensive stop with just about a minute and 15 seconds remaining in regulation. Xavier Wampa had one of the great nights of his Iowa City career for the Hawkeyes, a delayed blitz that put Grunkemeyer under pressure. He had to heave it up, and a good play there in the back end for Iowa. Penn State fans are always going to be clamoring for defensive pass interference. It was a really good defensive play. Iowa now is 5-2 because of the performance against Penn State, getting ready for a rivalry game, the battle for the pig, the Floyd of Rosedale Trophy against Minnesota. The Hawks at home, about a touchdown favorite against the Minnesota team. Penn State, it's an unfortunate situation. It's a lost season, of course, in State College. I really hope Terry Smith, a guy that has lived his life for this Nittany Lions program, gets a couple of wins as the interim head coach moving forward. Penn State is 0-4 in Big Ten play. Penn State, the number 2 team in the country in the preseason, is winless, 0-4 in Big Ten action. Crazy, unthinkable. Few have the words to describe what we have seen. In our final game of the weekend and taking care of business, Michigan hammers Washington at home 24-7. A really big game of resolve and bounce back. Maybe the blue-collar jackets are all around for the maize and blue as Michigan wins that game by 3 scores. Damon Williams threw 3 interceptions. He entered the game for UW with only 1 pick in the first 6 games of the year. Credit to a Wolverine secondary that I questioned slightly entering the game, and they contained a lethal Washington offense. They picked off Damon Williams 3 times, and on the other side, Bryce Underwood, as we shared, just so much more comfortable at home. It was our key matchup. These 2 young quarterbacks in this big spot. Bryce Underwood won the day. 21 of 27, 230 yards to the air, 2 touchdowns. And by the way, Jordan Marshall filling in for the injured Justice Haynes, 25 carries, 133 yards, and a touchdown. Michigan, who struggled to defend the run of USC and establish it themselves offensively 2 weeks ago, did exactly that to Washington, holding the Huskies to only 40 yards on the ground, 1.7 yards per pop. Michigan now gets ready to head to East Lansing in what will be a bitter rivalry game in primetime on NBC inside Spartan Stadium against Michigan State. Play nice, boys, please. None of the post-game theatrics that we have seen the last few years that have questioned this rivalry. Play hard, play physical, talk a little bit of smack in between the light lines and in those 60 minutes. Washington back home in Seattle, where the Huskies are so much better. They will take on a ranked Illinois team now, number 23 in the country, fresh off a bye next week. So, one final check here. We have shared this recording happening a little bit earlier than it normally does. If there are any big coaching changes, as of this point, there are not, either in Madison or in East Lansing. I do not anticipate that is going to be the case, but either in Madison or East Lansing, just go back to the first 4 or so minutes of this Big Ten Breakdown Week 8 post-game show. I appreciate you tuning in for it all. I'm Ben Stevens. We'll get you ready for Week 9 in the pregame show on Friday morning.